My wife betrayed me. She walked away when I needed her most. Now, for years later, she's back, full of apologies and second chances. She has no idea what's coming. My name is Nate. I'm 42, from Illinois, and I can tell you firsthand, life enjoys throwing curveballs when you least expect them. Back then, when I was 38, things were reasonably normal. I was married to Heather, and we had 3 fantastic kids. Ellie, who was 12, Liam, 11, and Zoe, 7. I worked as a construction site supervisor. It wasn't a glamorous job, but it paid the bills and gave me a sense of accomplishment. I liked building things, seeing them rise from blueprints to actual structures. Life felt stable, or as stable as life can be with 3 kids running around and the constant juggling act of work and family. I wasn't perfect, but I always tried. Late nights on the site, weekends spent fixing things around the house, and any time I could, I was at Ellie's volleyball games or Liam's science fairs. Zoe was my little artist, always drawing. She'd often sit with me in the evenings, proudly showing off her latest masterpiece. I lived for those moments. Then, a Tuesday afternoon, everything came crashing down. It was raining, which always made the site more dangerous. I was inspecting some scaffolding on the 2nd floor of a new warehouse we were building. It was something I'd done countless times before. I stepped onto the platform almost without thinking. Then there was a sharp snap, like a thick branch breaking. Before I could even react, the whole thing collapsed beneath me. It wasn't slow motion or dramatic like you see in movies. It was just gone. I plummeted 2 stories straight onto the concrete. The strange thing is, I don't even remember feeling the pain right away. It was like my brain just shut everything down for a few seconds. I was lying there, staring up at the gray sky, thinking, well, this is bad. My body wouldn't move. I couldn't tell if it was the impact or just pure panic. The guys on the site rushed over. I could hear their voices, someone yelling to call 911, another trying to keep me conscious. I remember thinking, am I dying? Is this it? The paramedics arrived, and from there, everything became a blur. I remember flashes of lights, the wail of sirens, bright hospital lights, someone cutting open my shirt. I must have lost consciousness because the next thing I knew, I was waking up in a hospital bed, hooked up to more machines than I'd ever seen outside of a sci-fi film. A nurse was there when I came to. She was calm, all business. You've had quite the fall, she said. We had to perform surgery on your back. You're stable now, but there's significant damage. She didn't sugarcoat anything. I had fractured several vertebrae in my lower back, broken 2 ribs, and torn up my right shoulder. The doctors said they'd done everything they could, but the damage to my spine was extensive. You may never walk properly again, the surgeon told me the next morning. He wasn't trying to be cruel, he was just stating facts. That's when the weight of everything truly hit me. I had gone from being a guy who could carry a heavy beam up a flight of stairs to someone who might need help just to stand up. My job was gone. My ability to support my family was gone. Even simple things like running around with my kids or fixing a leaky faucet seemed impossible. Heather was there when the doctor broke the news. She cried, which I appreciated at the time, but something about the way she cried bothered me. It wasn't just sadness. It was like she was overwhelmed, maybe even resentful. I also noticed she kept glancing at her phone, texting someone, which felt strange. I tried to dismiss it as stress. The first few days in that hospital bed were a blur of pain and weakness. The meds dulled the edge, but the ache was always there, a constant reminder of what I'd lost. I was mostly helpless, stuck staring at the ceiling. Heather came around, but less than I expected, less than I needed. She said the kids were having a hard time seeing me like that, which I understood on a surface level, but it still felt like a punch to the gut. All I wanted was to see their faces, to feel their hugs. My mom showed up a couple of times, a welcome sight, and my brother, Mike, managed to squeeze in visits when he could. But the physical stuff, the pain and the surgeries, wasn't the worst of it. It was the uncertainty, the gnawing fear of the unknown. I kept hounding the doctors, desperate for some reassurance. Will I ever walk again? Their answers were infuriatingly vague, a constant loop of we'll have to see how your recovery progresses. Each time I heard it, a little more hope drained away. Week 2 brought physical therapy, a whole new level of agony. Just sitting up felt like a monumental achievement, like I just finished a marathon. The therapist kept repeating the mantra, trust the process, but my mind was stuck on one terrifying question. What if this is as good as it gets? What if this is my new normal? The kids finally came to visit about 3 weeks after the accident. I was buzzing with anticipation, but the visit was off. Ellie gave me a quick hug, but it felt hesitant, like she was afraid to touch me. Liam just stared at the floor, kicking at an imaginary pebble. And Zoe, my baby, wouldn't even let go of Heather's hand, clinging to her like a lifeline. Daddy's going to get better, I told them, trying to sound convincing, even though a part of me wasn't so sure. It's just going to take time. Ellie nodded, trying to look brave, but I saw the worry etched in her young face. The visit was short, mercifully short, really. Heather said it was too much for them to handle and I didn't have the energy to argue. What could I say? I felt like a shadow of the dad I used to be, trapped in a broken body. So, yeah, that's how it all started. One rainy day, one stupid slip, and my whole world tilted on its axis. Little did I know that fall was just the opening act of a long and messy drama. And believe me, things only got stranger from there. Rehab is no picnic, but honestly, it wasn't the hardest part of this whole ordeal. The real pain came from watching Heather slowly disconnect while I was trapped in that hospital bed, helpless. If I wasn't already broken from the fall, what she did next finished the job, plain and simple. At first, she tried to keep up the charade. She'd swing by every few days, bring a familiar object from home, or just sit awkwardly by the bed, mindlessly scrolling through her phone. But the vibe was completely off. It wasn't just the stress of the situation, she looked like she'd rather be anywhere else on earth. When I got transferred to the rehab facility, it became even more obvious. Heather's visits became fewer and far between. First, it was every other day, then twice a week, and soon I was lucky if she showed up on a Sunday. I was constantly begging her to bring the kids. They were my lifeline, the one thing keeping me from completely losing it, but she always had an excuse ready. Ellie's got volleyball practice. Liam has a huge math test tomorrow, or Zoe's too scared to see you like this. Each excuse was like a fresh wound. I mean, yeah, I wasn't exactly looking my best, pale, skinny, and confined to a wheelchair, but I was still their dad. I missed them like crazy, and it felt like Heather was playing gatekeeper, controlling how much of a father I was allowed to be. A few weeks into rehab, I started to realize Heather was growing distant, emotionally unavailable. I'm not just talking physically, though that was definitely part of it. She'd sit with me for maybe 10 minutes and then suddenly remember she had to run errands. One time, she stayed just long enough to scroll through Instagram laughing at memes while I was struggling, literally struggling, to figure out how to move my damn legs again. I tried to talk to her about it. Heather, I need you right now. I can't go through this alone. She sighed like I was asking her to climb Mount Everest with no oxygen. Nate, I'm doing the best I can, but this is a lot. I'm juggling everything, and it's exhausting. I didn't push it, not then anyway. What could I even say? She wasn't wrong, it was a lot to deal with, but I was the one actually living it. Hearing her talk, you'd think my accident was some kind of personal inconvenience she had to endure. And then came that moment. I remember it so clearly. She walked into my hospital room one afternoon looking immaculate. New haircut, a dress I'd never seen before, perfectly applied makeup, like she was heading to some fancy brunch I definitely wasn't invited to. My first thought, maybe she was trying to boost my spirits? Wishful thinking. She sat down, pulled out a stack of papers, and with zero fanfare, said, I've been doing a lot of thinking, and I don't see a way forward for us anymore. I just blinked, my brain completely short-circuiting. What do you mean? This us. She slid the papers across the bedside table like she was offering me a damn menu. Divorce papers, Nate. I just can't do this, Nate, she continued, shaking her head like she was the one who'd fallen 2 stories onto concrete. I need someone who can actually contribute. Contribute. The urge to scream bubbled up inside me. I wanted to flip the table, yell, do something. But I was utterly powerless, strapped to that bed. It was like she thought I'd chosen to be lying there, hooked up to machines, like this whole thing was some elaborate scheme I'd concocted to ruin her life. All I could manage to choke out was, "You're serious?" She just nodded, looking more relieved than guilty. It's for the best, Nate, really? The kids need stability. I can't provide that while I am constantly worried about you. It took me a long minute to even begin processing what she was saying. I wanted to fight, to argue, to do something, anything, but what could I fight with? My body was broken, my job was gone, I was broke, and I didn't even have enough money to hire a decent lawyer. All I could do was sit there, numb, as she gathered her things and walked out of the room. The divorce went through at warp speed. In a matter of weeks, it was finalized. I got nothing. Not even visitation rights. Heather argued that constantly moving between homes wouldn't be good for the kids. Total BS, but I had no resources to argue in court. And then, as if all that wasn't enough of a kick in the teeth, I found out she was already dating someone. Chase. Of course his name was Chase. He was a 28-year-old personal trainer who looked like he spent more time flexing in the mirror than reading a damn book. From what I could piece together, Chase was rebuilding himself. Apparently his last girlfriend had dumped him for a yoga instructor, seriously, and he needed a fresh start with someone older and wiser. Heather, 37 and freshly rid of me, must have looked like the perfect foundation to rebuild on. My brother Mike couldn't stop laughing when he heard about it. So let me get this straight, she left you for a guy whose entire personality consists of protein shakes and arm day? Yep, I said, the bitterness thick in my throat. Apparently, that's what she needed to feel stable. But you know what? It wasn't even Chase that really got to me. It was when Heather packed up the kids and moved out of state with him. Without even a proper goodbye. One day, they were there, the next, they were just gone. The kids had always been my lifeline, but Heather just cut the cord. I missed Ellie's 13th birthday. I missed Liam's first soccer game as team captain. I missed Zoe's school art show. They were growing up and I wasn't there to see it. Meanwhile, Heather and Chase were living it up, or at least pretending to. A mutual friend sent me a screenshot of Heather's Facebook page. Her and Chase, posing in front of some ridiculously expensive cabin in the mountains, all smiles and cheesy hashtags about new beginnings. I wanted to smash my phone to pieces. But it wasn't about me anymore. It was about my kids. I kept thinking, what kind of guy is Chase to them? Does he even care about them? Does he even try to be a dad? Something deep down told me he was probably more interested in being their cool, fun buddy than a father figure. That's when my world felt like it was crumbling all over again. And knowing my kids were growing up thinking I didn't care, that's still the hardest thing of all. After the accident, I ended up crashing at my older brother Mike's place. Honestly, I had nowhere else to go. Mike's not the kind of guy you can have a heart-to-heart with, he's more of a show-up-when-it-matters kind of dude. He's an electrician, lives in a small house that always smells like burnt coffee mixed with the scent of old lumber. I showed up with a duffel bag and a spirit flatter than a pancake, and all he said was, "That couch is yours. Try not to make it smell worse than it already does." That was Mike's version of offering support. The first week was a blur of daytime television, which, let me tell you, is a special kind of soul-crushing. Judge Judy, infomercials for cleaning products that promise the impossible, a whole parade of useless garbage. I was pretty much just wallowing in it, but Mike wasn't about to let that continue. One evening, he just said, "You've got 1 week to feel sorry for yourself. After that, you're going to pull your ass up and figure something out." It wasn't exactly a pep talk, but it was exactly what I needed to hear. My first order of business was finding a lawyer to go after that damn construction company. My fall wasn't some random, unavoidable accident, it was straight-up negligence. Apparently, one of the guys on the crew had flagged the scaffolding as unsafe, but management ignored him because they didn't want to slow down the project. Well, their precious progress had slowed down my ability to walk properly, so I wasn't going to let them get away with it. I hired Rick, a lawyer who looked like he hadn't updated his wardrobe or hairstyle since the 70s. That comb over a never-ending rotation of truly awful ties, but the guy knew his law. "We've got a solid case here," he told me. "But they're going to fight tooth and nail, companies like this always do." And man, was he right? Their lawyers were sharks. They kept trying to shift the blame onto me, arguing I hadn't been careful enough while inspecting the site. As if I were supposed to magically know the platform was about to give way. It was infuriating, but Rick kept telling me to stay patient. "This is going to be a marathon, not a sprint," he said, which basically meant I was stuck in legal purgatory while the lawsuit inched forward at a snail's pace. I was also doing physical therapy. At first, just sitting up felt like someone was driving a knife into my spine, but the therapists were relentless, in a good way. Every day, they pushed me to do a little more. Those small wins were what kept me from giving up completely. The first time I managed to stand for a few seconds, it felt like I'd conquered Everest. When I took my first shaky step, I almost burst into tears. It wasn't pretty and it wasn't fast, but it was progress. Mike, despite his tough love exterior, was actually a huge help. He rigged up a makeshift gym in his garage with some old equipment he found on Craigslist. "You're going to hate this," he said, handing me a resistance band, and he was right. I absolutely did, but it helped. The best thing Mike did, though, was basically force me to go to a local support group for injured workers. At first, I was dead set against it. The thought of sitting in a circle and sharing my feelings sounded like my worst nightmare, but Mike wouldn't take no for an answer. "Look, these guys get it," he said. "You can't keep pretending you're the only guy in the world who's had a crap sandwich served to him." He had a point, so I went. The group was small, maybe 8 or 9 of us, and they weren't the crybaby types I'd been expecting. It was mostly guys like me who'd gotten messed up on the job. There was Carl, who'd fallen off a roof while fixing shingles, Dave, who'd crushed his hand in some machine, and Pete, who'd been hit by a forklift. We didn't spend much time dwelling on our injuries. Mostly, we swapped war stories about battling insurance companies, fighting legal battles, and trying to figure out how to navigate this new normal. "You ever try explaining to your kid why you can't throw a baseball anymore?" Pete asked one night. I told my son my pitching arm was retired, and he said, "Good, because you were never good at it anyway." The whole group just cracked up. That was the thing about that group. It was real, but it wasn't heavy. We traded lousy jokes and shared tips on how to navigate the system. It felt good to be around people who understood. The lawsuit was still this heavy weight I carried, and I was barely making ends meet, but for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt a flicker of progress. It wasn't much, just a tiny spark, but it was something. I kept telling myself, a mantra really, one step at a time. Just keep putting one foot in front of the other. Then, about a year into my recovery, Emma walked into the picture and things started to shift. It all began when Mike got a job wiring a wedding venue for lighting. He asked me to come along and help with some of the planning since I was getting okay at the whole logistics thing. Honestly, I didn't have anything else going on, so I went. Emma was the catering lead, a whirlwind of energy, clipboard in hand, firing off instructions to her staff. She had this wild, untamed brown hair pulled back in a bun that looked like it was perpetually on the verge of collapse, but she radiated confidence. It wasn't stressed-out franticness, it was command. There's a real difference. I didn't pay her much attention at first. My focus was on helping Mike figure out the power situation for the lighting rigs, not socializing. But while I was sitting on the steps outside the barn, catching a break from the organized chaos, Emma plopped down next to me. "Mike's brother, right?" she asked, pointing her pen at me like a weapon. "Yep. That obvious?" "Kind of. You've got the same, don't even think about it, look in your eyes." I actually laughed because, to be honest, she nailed it. We started talking and I learned she owned the catering company. She'd started it all after leaving her ex-husband who, from what I gathered, was a complete jerk. She was also raising her 10-year-old son, Max, all on her own. The thing about Emma that struck me was that she didn't treat me like I was fragile, like a piece of glass about to shatter. So many people did back then. They'd tiptoe around me, afraid of saying the wrong thing or mentioning my accident. Emma, though, asked me point-blank how I ended up in physical therapy. When I told her about the fall, she winced and said, "Damn, that's rough. So, what are you up to now?" It wasn't pity I heard, it was genuine curiosity, and when I admitted I was still figuring things out, she said, "Well, at least you're trying. Some people just throw in the towel." That hit me hard. After that day, we kept bumping into each other at events over the next few months. One day, during a quiet moment over coffee at an event, I told her how I'd been helping Mike with planning and logistics. I joked that I'd become the master of straight chairs and preventing speaker explosions. Emma didn't laugh. Instead, she said, "You know, you could do this for real. Event planning. You've got a real eye for detail and you're organized. That's half the battle right there." I shrugged it off initially. My confidence was pretty low back then, but Emma didn't let it go. A week later, she called me completely out of the blue and said, "I've got a crazy idea. Just hear me out." Her crazy idea was for us to join forces. She'd handle the catering side of things and I'd take care of logistics, scheduling, setup, lighting, sound, basically all the behind-the-scenes stuff. My first reaction was that she was nuts. I mean, who starts a business with a guy who's still in rehab and crashing on his brother's couch? But Emma wasn't kidding around. I don't know what it was, her unwavering confidence, her relentless persistence, or maybe just the fact that I was sick and tired of feeling like a burden, but I said yes. Launching a business is no joke. We were both pretty broke, so we pulled what little money we had and started small, mostly weddings and local fundraisers. I borrowed Mike's truck for hauling gear, and Emma called in every favor she could think of to get us gigs. It was a serious grind, but we made it work. Max, Emma's son, was around quite a bit too. He was this incredibly bright, funny kid who, somehow, was more mature than half the adults I knew. "You guys need to chill out," he said once when Emma and I were arguing about the placement of tables. "It's a wedding, not world peace," the kid had said. I snorted a laugh. He had a point. By the end of that first year of struggling to rebuild my life, my business actually started to gain traction, snagging a few decent jobs. One day, Emma said after an event, "You're walking without a cane again. You're working. You're piecing your life back together. Stop underestimating yourself." I hadn't understood how badly I needed to hear that until she'd said it. Emma came into my life at the exact right moment. She was fierce, funny, and everything I needed when I hadn't even known I was missing it. We built something worthwhile together, and for the first time since the accident, I felt like I was more than just some guy who'd fallen off scaffolding. I felt like myself again, not a broken version of me. You know how some days begin as just another day, then take a turn that completely redefines your existence? That's exactly what happened the day my phone rang and Ellie's name flashed on the screen, thanks to that Truecaller app I'd installed. I just stared at the screen as if I'd somehow willed her call into existence. I hadn't heard my daughter's voice in 4 agonizing years, not since Heather had packed up the kids and left for another state with her muscle-bound personal trainer, Chase. When I finally answered, my voice was a shaky, pathetic croak. "Ellie?" "Hey, Dad," she replied. Her voice sounded older, more mature than I remembered. "I got my own phone. I really wanted to call you. Mom tried to stop me a lot, but I just had to." I was momentarily speechless, choked with emotion. She continued, "Can we come visit you? Liam and Zoe really want to see you too. We miss you." My hand almost dropped the phone. "What?" "Let me back up a bit. After the accident and Heather's swift departure, I didn't have the financial resources or physical health to fight for visitation rights. I could barely afford the gas to get to physical therapy, let alone pay for a lawyer to drag Heather to court. But I tried, believe me, I tried. I texted, called, emailed. Each time, Heather either brushed me aside or completely blocked me. "It's not a good time for the kids," she'd say, or "they're better off with a stable routine." Stable routine? My ass. She just didn't want me around. I even wrote letters, handwritten letters in the old-fashioned way, hoping she might pass them along to Ellie, Liam, and Zoe. I seriously doubted if they ever saw a single one. So, when Ellie called completely out of the blue saying they wanted to visit, it felt like nothing short of a miracle. "Of course, you can visit," I told her, my voice thick with emotion. "When? Next weekend?" she asked, almost hesitantly, as if she expected me to turn her down, as if I wouldn't move heaven and earth for this. After hanging up, I just sat on the couch, phone still clutched in my hand. Mike walked in, saw my stunned expression, and asked, "What's up? You win the lottery or something?" I managed to get the words out. "Ellie just called. The kids are coming to visit." Mike raised an eyebrow, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. "Seriously? Heather's actually letting that happen?" "She doesn't know yet," I said, a slight grin spreading across my face. "Ellie has her own phone now." Mike grinned back, a broad, genuine smile. "Well, I'll be damned. You better start getting the place ready then." The next week passed by in a frantic, almost unreal blur. I cleaned the house like a man possessed, scrubbing and polishing every surface. Even though Mike kept telling me the kids wouldn't care if the house was spotless, I didn't listen. It wasn't for them, really. It was for me. I needed everything to be perfect. I needed them to know they were walking into a space that was filled with love and anticipation for them. I wanted everything to be perfect for their arrival. Emma, bless her heart, really stepped up. She even surprised me with a welcome home banner for the living room. I never would have thought of that, honestly. The day they were scheduled to arrive, I drove to the bus station, arriving a good 30 minutes early. I just couldn't sit still at home. My nerves were shot. When I saw the bus finally pull in, my heart hammered in my chest like I was about to meet total strangers. I just stood there, frozen in place, until Ellie spotted me. "Dad," she yelled and started running. She squeezed me so hard I thought my back, which was still giving me trouble, might give way again, but I didn't care one bit. Liam was next, joining the hug a little awkwardly at first, but then he buried his face in my shoulder. Zoe hung back, looking shy and uncertain. I crouched down and held out my arms. She didn't hesitate, running straight to me and whispering, "I missed you," into my ear. Over dinner, which Emma had thoughtfully prepared, things began to feel more relaxed. Zoe announced that spaghetti was her favorite food, and Liam launched into a detailed explanation of some soccer play. Ellie remained quiet, just pushing her food around her plate, but she wasn't ignoring me completely. I felt like she was watching me carefully, trying to figure out if I was still the same dad she remembered before everything went wrong. After dinner, Ellie finally broke the silence. "Mom said you didn't want to see us." My blood went cold. "What did you say?" "She told us you never even tried. She said you didn't care about us." It felt like a gut punch, like all the air had been sucked out of the room. "Ellie, that's just not true. I wrote letters, so many letters. I called, I emailed, I begged your mom to let me see you all." She just stared at me, her eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Then why didn't you fight harder for us?" I took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. "Because I couldn't, Ellie. I was broke. I was barely functional, still going to physical therapy appointments constantly. I wanted to fight desperately, but I just didn't have the money or the strength to win against her." Ellie didn't say anything for what felt like a lifetime. Liam looked up from his plate, a question on his face. "So, you did want us?" "More than anything in the world," I told him, my voice thick with emotion. "You were my kids. I love you all, and I always have." Zoe, who had been so quiet during the entire meal, suddenly burst into tears and threw herself into my arms. "I knew you loved us," she sobbed. Ellie followed, and then Liam. We all sat there, a tangled mess of tears and hugs, while I tried to explain everything, tried to make them understand. Later that night, I showed them the court filings, the restraining orders Heather had put in place, and copies of all the emails I'd sent. Ellie read every single word, her jaw tightening with each line. Liam flipped through the papers, shaking his head in disbelief. "She lied to us," he muttered, his voice full of anger. "She probably thought she was doing what was best for you," I said, trying to be fair, even though it was difficult, but she was wrong. Dead wrong. Ellie looked up at me, her eyes filled with regret. "I'm sorry, Dad, for believing her." "You don't have to apologize," I said gently. "You were just kids. You trusted her because she's your mom." That seemed to ease something inside of her. She hugged me again, tighter this time, and said, "We're here now, Dad." The rest of the weekend was incredible. We went to a park and tossed a frisbee, played board games until way past everyone's bedtime, and just stayed up late talking. Ellie finally started opening up about school and her friends. Liam showed me some ridiculous trick shots he'd learned in soccer, some of which were actually kind of impressive. Zoe stuck to me like glue, asking a million questions about my life and laughing at every single one of my dumb jokes. For the first time in so long, I actually felt like a dad again, and it was the best feeling in the world. My kids were back in my life, and that was something no one could ever take away from me. Things had been on a definite upswing since reconnecting with them. We were talking almost every day, and they were constantly hinting about moving in with me. That's when Heather decided to inject herself back into the picture, stirring up drama like it was her personal calling. Looking back, I should have seen it coming. She's never been good at letting other people enjoy their lives unless she's the center of attention. It all started roughly a week after the kids posted a picture with me and Emma on social media. It was one of those typical, slightly corny family shots we'd taken at the park, everyone smiling like we actually belonged together. Apparently, Heather saw it because the next day my phone blew up with her name flashing across the screen. I hesitated before answering. It had been years since I'd actually heard her voice, and I knew deep down it wasn't going to be a friendly chat, but I reluctantly picked up. She didn't even bother with a greeting. "What the hell are you doing, Nate?" she spat, her voice instantly grating on me. Living my life?" I replied, trying to keep my tone even. "You've brainwashed them," she snapped, her voice laced with venom. "The kids, they're going on and on about how great you are and how awful I've been. Do you even realize what that's done to me?" I almost laughed out loud. "Heather, I didn't have to brainwash anyone. They figured it out on their own. Maybe you should have considered that before feeding them lies for 4 years. That really set her off. She launched into a tirade about how Chase wasn't pulling his weight, how she'd sacrificed everything for the kids. I cut her off right there. "Heather, I wasn't the one who packed up and left. You made your choices and now you're pissed off that they don't like the consequences. That's on you, not me." She hung up on me, but I knew that wasn't the end of it. Predictably, a week later, she showed up unannounced at my office. Emma and I were in the middle of finalizing the logistics for a wedding when Heather strolled in like she owned the place. I barely recognized her. She looked worn down, like life had chewed her up and spat her out. "Nate," she said, all serious and somber, "we need to talk." I sighed inwardly and glanced at Emma, who gave me one of those "I'm here if you need me" looks before quietly excusing herself to the back. I turned back to Heather. "What's this about?" She launched into this ridiculously long and self-serving speech about how Chase had dumped her. Apparently, he'd decided the whole family man thing wasn't for him anymore and had moved on to dating some TikTok influencer who posts videos of her meal prep routines and gym workouts. Honestly, they're perfect for each other, both obsessed with their own image. Heather, who'd built her entire new life around this guy, was now left trying to hold everything together on her own. "And?" I prompted when she finally paused for breath. "And I want us to rebuild the family," she said, like it was the most logical thing in the world. I swear, I nearly choked. "You mean the family you walked out on? The one you traded for protein shakes and a six-pack?" "Nate, I was overwhelmed," she said, her voice cracking, clearly trying to squeeze out some tears. "You don't understand how hard it was for me back then." I just stared at her, incredulous. "Heather, I was the one lying in a hospital bed with a broken back. You didn't even stick around long enough to find out if I'd recover. Don't even try to talk to me about hard." She kept going, listing all the reasons she supposedly deserved a second chance. The kids needed stability. We had history together. She missed the way things used to be. It was all complete and utter nonsense, and I told her so. "The only second chance you deserve is a loyalty punch card at the smoothie bar," I said, deadpan. That shut her up for a second, the absurdity of my statement hitting home. Then, predictably, she got defensive, the crocodile tears drying up instantly. "So, that's it, huh? You're choosing her," Heather said, a slight tremble in her voice as she vaguely pointed towards the back of the room where Emma had gone. I didn't hesitate. Yeah, Heather, I am. It wasn't a hard decision to make. Emma had been a constant, a rock when everything else was crumbling. Emma was there for me when you weren't. She helped me piece my life back together. You were the one who set it all on fire and just walked away. The words felt good to say, a long overdue truth finally spoken. As if on cue, Emma returned. Who's this? She asked, her tone light, like Heather was a random solicitor. I saw the blood rush to Heather's face. She mumbled something about needing to leave and practically fled. Emma raised an eyebrow, a knowing look in her eyes. Let me guess, Heather? What did she want? To rekindle the romance? Emma snorted, a genuine laugh escaping. Wow. That takes guts, considering she dumped you for some guy named Chase. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. A few days later, my phone rang. It was Heather. This time, she was subdued, almost pathetic. She started rambling about how difficult things were now that Chase was gone. I don't know how I'm going to manage on my own, she whined. Honestly, I was out of sympathy. Maybe you should try doing what I did, I said, a bit of an edge to my voice. Start fresh and figure it out. She tried one last manipulative tactic, a desperate guilt trip. What about the kids? Don't they deserve a complete family? They will have one soon, I replied, my voice firm. It just won't be with you. That was the last I heard from her for a while. Looking back, there was a certain satisfaction in seeing her finally face the consequences of her choices. For years, she'd spun the story portraying me as the villain while she played the victim. Now, the truth was out and she had to deal with it. I won't pretend I didn't enjoy watching her squirm, but mostly, I felt a huge wave of relief wash over me. For the first time in ages, I didn't feel like I was at her beck and call. I had my kids, my business, and a future that didn't revolve around her. Things really started to improve after that. Take the lawsuit, for example. It was a long and grueling process, but the case finally reached its conclusion. The construction company pulled out all the stops to avoid taking responsibility, blaming me, blaming the weather, blaming the guy who assembled the scaffolding, but my lawyer, Rick, was relentless. He dismantled their arguments piece by piece. The judge ultimately ruled in my favor, and the settlement was considerable. I won't throw numbers around, but let's just say it was enough to drastically alter my life. I used the money to expand the event business that Emma and I had been building together. We invested in better equipment, hired more staff, and started securing bigger contracts, weddings, corporate events, festivals. You name it, we were there. But the best part was the financial stability it brought. I was finally able to give my kids the life they deserved. I bought a house, a real home, where each of them had their own room, no more squeezing into spare spaces. I even managed to set up college funds for Ellie, Liam, and Zoe, something I had never thought would be possible. For the first time in years, I wasn't just scraping by, I was thriving. The custody battle was the next hurdle. But surprisingly, Heather didn't even fight it. I suspect she knew the kids had already made up their minds, and if I'm being honest, she probably didn't want the responsibility anymore. She signed the papers without any fuss, and just like that, they were officially back with me. Emma and I grew closer than ever during this period. She was my constant support. Working alongside her in the business had forged a strong partnership, but now we were building something even bigger, a life together. She became my anchor through some rough seas, and I made damn sure she knew how much she meant to me. Heather, on the other hand, retreated back to her roots. Last I heard, she was holding down a part-time job at some shop and living in a small apartment. The kids, well, they see her differently now. They still make the occasional visit, but there's no question where their loyalties lie. This is home now. Thanks for hanging in there and reading my story. I won't lie, putting this all down wasn't exactly a picnic. It unearthed a lot of old baggage I thought I'd managed to bury deep beneath a mountain of terrible dad jokes and late-night pizza runs. But here we are. I'm definitely not the same guy I was before the accident, that's for sure. For one thing, my walk now resembles something between a penguin and a zombie shuffle, which makes stealth missions of any kind utterly impossible. But I've learned to laugh at it because seriously, what other choice do I have? At least it gives me a solid excuse to avoid leg day at the gym. Life isn't perfect, not by a long shot, but it's damn good. I've got my kids back in my life, a business that I actually look forward to going to on Mondays, and Emma, who, God knows how, tolerates my ridiculous walk and my even more ridiculous sense of humor. For all of that, I feel incredibly lucky, genuinely blessed. If you're reading this and life's currently kicking you in the teeth, just remember that it's perfectly okay to feel down, to lick your wounds for a bit. But don't stay down there. Take the hits, find the humor wherever you can, and keep getting back on your feet. You never know what unexpected joys, what unexpected treasures are waiting for you just around the corner.